we try not to spend too much time focused on this is, sales credit and this is marketing credit. No buyer ever has a single touch point with a brand. In some cases, our support team should probably get credit for deals. It's really about how we create a holistic journey and then look at attribution when we say this interesting combination of touch points is something that we can actually replicate and scale.
Today, I have Melissa from Vimeo with me. Vimeo is a publicly traded company with a kick-ass CEO, a woman, and Melissa is a woman, and today it's International Women's Day, so I feel very lucky today to be talking about what it takes to do PLG on such a big user base, 350 million users, what it takes to educate that user base as well, and in the end, talking about how authenticity in a video always wins. Who is buying Vimeo? Why? And what are they getting out of it?
So lots of people still think of Vimeo as like an indie YouTube, but the reality is that we work with small businesses all the way up to the Fortune 100, and they're all using video in different ways. But the two sort of markets that we target are marketers who are using video to communicate, to engage with their audiences, and thinking about all of the ways that they do that in kind of video-first ways now. And similarly with employee comms, people that sit internal to companies, they're also thinking about replacing training programs, onboarding programs, communications programs, employer branding with a video-first approach. Because again, this is how they attract the best talent, and it's also how they cascade strategy to the employees all around the world.
Interesting, because Vimeo has been perceived as a YouTube competitor because that's how it started. And as a marketer, you have the tough job to change the narrative, to sell to a different persona, to a video team and to a creative team. How did you do that? What was the journey?
I think a huge part of it was realizing that the narrative probably didn't need to change that much. The market changed. So, video used to be something that only Hollywood could do, right? Big production, huge budgets, star filmmaker, the whole thing. Then that got democratized a little bit, where suddenly everybody had a, kind of personal camera, right? Now everybody could do that. Then that camera got put in your pocket. And then this huge explosion in the amount of video content changed, but why people were using it never really changed, right? They're using it to be able to elevate their human expression, to be more human, to be able to tell interesting stories in new ways to more people. That was like this, you could say the same thing about the film industry, right? They're making films in Hollywood to accomplish the same goal. So I think it was more about convincing businesses that this was a part of what they needed to do as brands than it was, hey, come use Vimeo in a different way. They're actually using it in many of the same ways.
Curious also, what are some of the strategies that you've seen marketers using video that impressed you recently?
I think people are thinking creatively about a lot of different types of video formats now. I personally think that one of the biggest things that marketers have to get over is this idea that video all has to be professionally produced and pixel perfect. It doesn't. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for marketers to use video in ways that are more immediate and more natural. The same way that we've been watching people in our consumer lives on social channels use video to talk about what they're going to wear today, or talk about, a random thought that they had on a walk. It can be that type of content too, because that's what we've now adapted to using in our consumer lives.
What are some of the some marketing motions that your team has been doing recently that are working for you?
So Vimeo has a really large base of existing users, and that's everything from people who were making a birthday video to use in their personal lives, all the way up through somebody who's producing thousands of hours of video a month for a large company. So right now, what we've been really focused on now for a number of years is looking at this community of users and looking at kind of the commonalities that we have across these things. The same person in some cases who's doing video production in a large company is also making the birthday video. And we're looking for ways that we can tap into this existing community to bring more businesses into the world of more advanced video tools. So if you're already making thousands of hours of video in a company, what's happening to that video? Are you just, kind of storing and hosting it somewhere? Or are you aware that there's also ways that you can take that same video content and remix it and repurpose it and get more utility out of it ultimately? And those are some of the advanced tools that we're using to market to our existing community of users.
So you're educating them to become better creators.
Yeah.
I like that. What are some of the things that you've tried that are not working?
A learning has always been that if you don't stay close to the customer, you can really get off your mark a little bit, right? And so I find that there's always this like very delicate dance between here's the customer that we have now and here's the customer that we want in the future. And you need to figure out ways to market just a little bit ahead of where your sort of aspirational customer might potentially be. So in the past, if you're marketing to somebody who's using you sort of in a more tactical way, if you go and speak the language of the CEO to that type of customer, you're going to miss the mark.
How do you approach customer marketing? Since I imagine that a big part of your job becomes synonymous with customer marketing. Do you have a separate team for that? Actually, how is your team structured?
Yeah, so we have a lifecycle marketing team that also focuses on customers and customer advocacy. So within that team, they're focused on, I would say primarily two things. One is how do we provide our users with the inspiration that they need to, create more, better video? And also, how do we start to introduce video to customers who historically think that the utility of Vimeo kind of stops once you create a video, host it on Vimeo, and embed it on your website? There's so much more that you could be doing with those types of assets. You could be making them interactive. You could be using them in events. And we just strive to making a lot of that easier, but most of the users don't even realize that we do those types of things.
To get back to the other question, how did you structure your team right now?
So I sit in global demand generation. So we focus on, how we drive demand across our self-serve and sales assist businesses. We have regional teams that sit in our major markets, both in the US and in EMEA and in APAC. So we work with lifecycle teams and channel teams to execute programs across the board. So some of those focused on marketers and some of those focused on comms. Yeah.
Is your marketing team also focused on cross-selling, upselling app? Does it get involved in that build?
Yes, yeah. So as you might imagine, especially in a large company, lots of different users will create accounts. Once, maybe 100 different people at a large company might actually have a Vimeo account. When you start sharing video internally, that can become really cumbersome with lots of people in different accounts. So we do some, kind of upselling, cross-selling both within our self-serve phase. And also once they're on an enterprise account, let's say that we have a communications team that's using the tool for internal communications, we'll also seek to say, hey, by the way, your marketing team could probably also get utility out of the same types of tools.
You do the handoff to the sales team when the deal is big enough or when there's a certain threshold in activities, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So for the customer marketing part in app, do you have like a special team, a growth team, or is the same lifecycle team that handles it?
It's a little bit of both. It kind of depends a little bit on where the activation is happening. But the signal, in some cases, the signals that we'll look for are the same. Is somebody already doing sort of X, Y, and Z, and are they ready to take the next step in their journey to use more advanced tools?
What are the metrics that you drive your team on and yourself?
So our metrics fundamentally are, pipeline and bookings. Like that's what we're super focused on.
That's surprising.
And then on the self-serve side, we of course look at, trials, first-time subscribers, and renewers.
And to measure pipeline, you measure influence pipeline as well, or direct pipeline?
Both. Yes.
And how do you measure attribution?
It's an interesting question. I would say we measure it because mostly we want to see where do we invest and where do we continue to make smart decisions about what's going to drive people along a journey. And sometimes that's sales and sometimes that's marketing. We try not to spend too much time focused on this is, sales credit and this is marketing credit. No buyer ever has a single touch point with a brand. In some cases, our support team should probably get credit for deals. It's really about how we create a holistic journey and then look at attribution when we say this interesting combination of touch points is something that we can actually replicate and scale.
I love your comment with the support team. Our support team is like amazing, and we don't look at that kind of attribution. You're right.
Yeah, it's the whole user experience. And when you get really wrapped around the axle on, okay, well, where do we attribute this to? It's often not the whole story of how a customer actually came to you. If you ask somebody on a forum, how did you find out about us? It's never going to be what your marketing system tells you it is. Never, never, never. The performance marketing team will say, great, they responded to our search ad. And the answer that they'll give you is, I found your name in a community of marketers. I saw a thing on social, so-and-so from your company mentioned, that's always what it is.